Today, survival is marketed as gear. During World War II, survival was behavior. Civilians didn't prepare for collapse, they lived inside it. Across Europe, entire populations adapted to hunger, cold, darkness and silence under conditions that would be, well, legally unacceptable today. Many of the techniques that kept people alive were later discouraged, regulated, or quietly erased, not because they failed, but because they exposed just how fragile modern systems really are. These weren't clever hacks. They were harsh responses to scarcity, designed to work when law, infrastructure, and supply chains stopped functioning. What follows are 7 survival practices so effective and so severe that post-war governments moved quickly to replace them with centralized systems and regulations, not because they were dangerous, but because they made people independent. And independence is honestly rather hard to control. Paraffin stoves replaced centralized fuel dependence when cities went dark. When electricity and gas networks collapsed under bombing, civilians reverted to liquid fuel cooking. Paraffin stoves became illegal or heavily regulated after the war due to indoor fire risks, yet during the conflict they were the only reliable way to cook indoors without wood or coal. Families stored fuel in sealed tins under floorboards, rationed use by meal, and learned ventilation discipline through, trial and error. The method worked because it didn't rely on distribution networks. Applied today, the principle is simple. Any cooking system that requires external pressure or infrastructure is a liability. A low-tech fuel source that can be stored, measured, and ignited manually remains viable when everything else fails. Tin can heaters created illegal indoor heat without chimneys or fuel rations. Improvised heaters made from scrap tins, cardboard, and wax were later discouraged because they bypassed fuel controls and safety codes. During the war, they were tolerated because the alternative was freezing. These heaters produced steady, radiant warmth with minimal smoke and could be built from waste materials. Civilians placed them on tiles, rotated rooms for heat conservation, and used them to prevent frost injuries. The lesson isn't the device itself, but the principle: decentralized heat production from salvaged materials. Modern homes depend entirely on centralized systems. When those fail, most people have no secondary option. Victory gardens operated outside commercial agriculture and food control. After the war, small-scale urban food production declined, not because it was inefficient, but because it undermined centralized supply chains. During World War II, governments encouraged it out of necessity, then quietly replaced it with industrial agriculture afterward. These gardens weren't hobbies. They were engineered for calories per square foot, seed saving, and seasonal rotation. Civilians composted everything, reused containers, and tracked yields meticulously. Applied today, this knowledge isn't about aesthetics, it's about food sovereignty. Anyone who can't produce calories without a store is vulnerable by design. Hand-crank radios, you see, bypassed grid-controlled information flow. Mechanical radios were phased out once power grids stabilized, but during the war, they were absolutely essential. Information determined survival. Air raids, evacuation orders, water access, and ration changes all depended on broadcast access. The hand-crank radio required no batteries, no grid, and, no permission. Families even trained their children to operate them. Today, information is entirely digital and centralized, and when power fails, silence returns immediately. Still, the principle remains: information access must not depend on infrastructure you don't control. Blackout curtains enforced invisibility through civilian discipline. After the war, urban lighting regulations made blackout practices obsolete. But during those years, they were enforced with fines because, light meant death. Civilians layered fabric, tar paper, and wool to block both light and heat loss. Entire cities disappeared every single night. This wasn't symbolic. It was survival through invisibility. If we look at this today, the lesson isn't about wartime concealment, but rather about energy discipline, light discipline, heat retention, and space consolidation. These are survival behaviors, not just conveniences. Ash sifting reclaimed fuel from waste and, in a way, defied ration systems. Later on, coal ash recovery was discouraged as inefficient and unsafe. But during the Second World War, it was actually mandatory. Civilians sifted ash every day to recover any unburned coal fragments, then pressed the dust into briquettes using fat or starch as binders. This practice extended fuel supplies well beyond official rations. The real principle here is reclaiming value from waste. These days, modern society discards usable energy every single day, all because efficiency replaced resilience. But in a crisis, waste becomes a resource again. Manual water pumps bypassed municipal failure and legal access controls. After the war, these pumps were removed from cities in favor of centralized water systems. But during bombing campaigns, they were the only source left. Civilians repaired seals, shared schedules, filtered and boiled water, and guarded access. The pump didn't fail simply because it wasn't connected to anything fragile. If we think about this today, it really exposes a critical weakness. Most people cannot access water without electricity. That's not progress. That's dependency. These methods weren't banned because they were dangerous. They were sidelined because they worked without permission. They allowed ordinary people to endure without systems, experts, or infrastructure. That level of independence doesn't fit neatly into modern planning. But, history doesn't care what's convenient. It only records what works. If even one of these techniques challenged how you think about preparedness, then this channel is for you. Subscribe to The Past They Hid, share this with someone who still thinks resilience comes from convenience, and keep this knowledge alive. Because, honestly, forgetting is the most dangerous survival failure of all.